My guest today is Chris Bailey. Chris Bailey is an animator, a director, and a professor over at Chapman University. He teaches storyboards. Chris has worked on an array of different movies and TV shows spanning over the last 20 to 30 years, starting out with The Great Mouse Detective, going to Lion King, Little Mermaid, and he moved over into animation doing Kim Possible, a little bit of directing there, and he also did some fantastic stuff with Scooby Doo, and he brought it to the modern day with Scooby Doo and Guess Who. You can check out Chris over at Chapman University where he teaches storyboarding. Fantastic class. Sign up while you can because I'm pretty sure the seats will go really, really quickly. And he's also currently directing an animated series for the Great Wolf Lodge Resorts. I hope you guys enjoy this episode, and please, 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 please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. It's cool, it's free, and it's dope as hell. Thanks, guys, and enjoy the episode. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the What's in My Head podcast. Today I'm joined by Chris Bailey. He has done so much between Scooby Doo and Guess Who. We'll talk about that for sure. Alvin and The Chipmunks, Hocus Pocus, X-Men 2, and so much more. But we were just talking. I had to stop the conversation and hit record because we were talking about one of your mentors, and we were just talking about him. You want to bring him back up? We were talking about Chuck Jones. You know, this was your mentor, or this is somebody you looked up to as a kid. Please go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me back up 1 second. When I was going to Cal Arts, before I went to Cal Arts in high school, I was looking into colleges, and I was never really a fine artist, so fine art schools didn't quite seem to be a good fit. Wanted to do comic books. Weren't really at that time schools where you could learn to do that and get a bachelor's. But I was watching cartoons after school, and this Pepe Le Pew cartoon came on by Chuck Jones. It's a little dangerous to say this because he's been canceled recently, but I just thought, this is the funniest damn thing I've ever seen in my life. Just this guy going after this girl that has no idea how repulsive he is. And literally, as soon as I turned the TV off, I was reading a magazine and it mentioned Cal Arts and their animation program. I was a junior in high school. Within 6 months, I was accepted. A year after that, I was at Cal Arts. And 3 months later, I actually met Chuck Jones at an animation screening in Beverly Hills. And what's very fun about that is that, so a bunch of our friends, we got in our cars, car pulled down to Beverly Hills to see this screening. I think it was a salute to Mel Blanc. And a bunch of our friends went and our classmates sat in the front and in the center. A few buddies and I, we decided we would sit behind taped off seats because we knew it was going to be a who's who of animators. And one of my best friends at Cal Arts, Jeff DeGrandis, he's a director as well, director, producer. He kept tapping Chuck on the shoulder and asked him if he'd come speak out at Cal Arts. And after speaking with his daughter and Chuck back and forth a few times, Chuck invited him to come out to his house and bring a few friends. I was one of those friends. So within a year and a half, really, of watching this Chuck Jones cartoon, realizing I got to be an animator, I was at Chuck Jones' house.
There's two things that I really want to hit on. And one of them, I would have figuratively and literally shit my pants sitting in. Like, I've got to imagine this dude has an aura, right? But one thing I want to circle back to right before we get into that is obviously not you shitting your pants, because that would have been me. I would have been just sitting there, I would have been clammed up, just seeing, royalty sitting across from me. But what was that cartoon, the Pepe Le Pew cartoon, that sparked that curiosity? Had you had thoughts about becoming an artist as far as animation? Because you said comic books before, but had you tinkered around with the idea for becoming an artist in animation before then, or was that thing just set it right off?
It did set it right off, but when I look back, it kind of makes sense, because I always liked the comic book artists that would animate the character jumping through a panel. He would sort of ghost 3 or 4 panels, and then there would be like the current panel. So you could see Spider-Man jump onto a lamppost and swing around and land on the cab or something. Mm-hmm. And I do remember looking at that stuff and thinking, oh, these two work. Oh, this one doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And then some artists would do it and it didn't really make sense. They'd have Hulk pounding on, side view pounding on the wall, but it kind of looked stiff, like the same drawing over and over. And other guys could do it. Man, you could really feel him pounding the wall. And I was always curious what that was. So the artists I liked in comics really knew how to move a figure around. And when animation was really just a way to take my drawings and, bringing them to life. Literally.
Now, you brought up comics, and I'm pretty sure you can see them in the back, but
Sure.
that's just one. My wife, and I say this all me for all the time on this podcast, but you look around my room, I try to fill up my room full of stuff that makes me feel like a kid again. I reminisce when I come in here. It puts me into the mindset of talking to, my heroes, the people that elicit an emotion out of me at such a young age, and even as an adult, right? These cartoons, these movies, these comic books. And you said that you had specific comic book artists that you looked up to. Who were some of those artists that you might have had like, man, this guy is great, this guy's not that great, but who were some of the ones you really, really sought after when it came to books?
When I first started buying comics, I just kind of missed that Jack Kirby era.
Mm-hmm.
So he had just left Marvel. And so like John Buscema kind of took over for Kirby. So actually, let me see if I can take this down off the wall.
Okay.
Show you real quick.
He has one of the best Silver Surfer runs I've ever seen.
Oh my God, yeah. And so this is right when he took over. Can you see what these are?
Oh yeah.
These are
his
two
art is
pages
so clean.
From Fantastic Four, I think 118. Yeah, 113.
Okay.
So, but I remember picking up this comic I loved monster comics at the time, and it was Ben Grimm turning into the Thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a recreation by John Buscema on my wall that was given to me by a friend. And he's like, it must happen, it must. And it says, and now the Thing. And I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. And I remember flipping inside it. He was like 10 years old. And I've been burned by comics with great covers and crummy art on the inside a few times. So I was kind of cautious. And then when I saw that it looked just as cool on the inside as it was on the outside, I bought it. But I really wasn't a fan then. But years later, probably within 2 or 3 years, I was a hardcore fan. And yeah, John Buscema was a big favorite. Can really draw anything. And Gene Colan, Maurice Severin is probably one of my favorite artists of all time. I love Herb Trimpe's Hulk.
Yeah.
It was ridiculously fun. Those are the 4 that come to mind, like off the top of my head, but I'm sure there's more. Frank Miller later, of course.
Oh, Frank Miller I loved his Daredevil stuff more than I like. So this might sound, what's the word? Sacrilegious when you're a Batman fan. Obviously, I've got a shit ton of Batman stuff as well as Ninja Turtles.
Sure.
Like I said, everything back here, like I said, makes me feel like a kid.
I just organized my Batman stack on the bookcase over here on the other wall.
Oh yeah,
where all my Batman books are together. So,
but I loved his Daredevil run more than I loved. Like I said, The Dark Knight Returns is one of those books that everybody brings up. You got that one, you've got The Watchmen, you've got Swamp Thing by Alan Moore, which is one of my all-time favorites.
Oh my goodness, yeah, for sure.
That man has a way with words that I've never, especially when you come to an inanimate, this guy does not exist. Swamp Thing just can't be real. He probably smells horrible. He's got bad breath, but there's something endearing about this character.
But he kind of changed it from just sort of like a dude that got plant powers because he fell into a swamp, and just turned it into this crazy myth.
He gave him
that's
soul.
what's brilliant about Alan Moore.
Yeah, he gave him soul. He gave him a purpose.
Yeah.
It wasn't just him searching. It was this. As I've gotten older, I've started looking at comics and TV shows and cartoons differently. And when I look at it, it's like this sense of loss that Alec Holland had to go through. This constant, just like, is this me remembering, or am I forcing these memories on myself to remember because I was an outsider looking in? I was a parasite looking in when this man was losing his life. Did I assume his responsibilities or his memories, or was this really me? And I love that dichotomy. I don't know if that's the right word. It feels like it is. If not, I'm just
it's Kafkaesque. It's am I a cockroach who thinks he was a man, or a man that thinks he's a cockroach?
Yeah,
I'm probably getting that wrong, but I remember that from.
At this point, we're just gonna roll with it, Chris, because I think it sounds right, and if you think it sounds right, we're just gonna keep going with it.
Excellent. Hey, let me ask you. You were talking about how you love Daredevil more than any of Frank's other work. Why is that? What did you love so much about his Daredevil run? Because I have my own thoughts on it, but I want to hear yours.
It's probably the Ninja Turtles behind me. When I found out that Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird were such Daredevil fans, and huge Frank Miller fans. And then there was a secret Marvel never came out and said yes it was, because Marvel couldn't do that because they weren't owned by Marvel. The Turtles weren't owned by Marvel. But when they've come out and said that, oh, it was, you know, Matt Murdock jumping in the way, and that's what the ooze was that hit the Turtles. That's the same thing that gave him. I think that's what the connection was, because entered into all of this was the Turtles. That 90s movie is what got me into looking deeper into animation and comics and pop culture in general. Without that, I don't know where I'd probably be into some horrible just musical films that just have nothing besides just pretentious actors and actors. I don't like shitting on stuff, but I would feel like I'd be down that path, vice pop culture and comic books, if it wasn't for the movie. But yeah, so I think that's what it was.
So you love it partially just because of the way Turtles and Daredevil intertwine.
Yes, and I was such a fan of Daredevil's original costume. I thought the yellow, black, and red was so sharp looking, because back then you really didn't have I can't think of one, at least, you know, with the exception of Luke Cage. There was nobody that really had yellow, and yellow always popped. I mean, my phone, it's not my favorite color, but it's yellow. My first car was a yellow car, so there's something about that color just being drawn right to the, you know, right to the screen, right to the senses. I think that's really what it was between that costume and obviously the turtle connection down the road. So
cool.
Yeah, but nonetheless, man, I don't even know where. Oh, we were just talking about Chuck Jones, and we got off on a little bit of tangent. Do you still read comics now? Before we get off comics, do you still read comics?
You know, I don't read that many. I reread things that I have for reference occasionally, but I did just get a couple things in the mail from a guy. There was I helped the guy in Kickstarter last year. He was doing these zombie. His name's Will Penny. He was doing these zombie glasses with zombies on them. And when you put your cold drink in there, it's like the zombie appears. It was really cool.
That's awesome.
And he wanted so much money. It's like, I'm a big tiki guy. I like rum drinks. And it was very comic booky, like 50s EC. Loved the whole vibe. So I sponsored it and got the glasses. And just recently I was listening to a tiki podcast, the Desert Oasis Room, and he was a guest. I'm like, wait a minute, Will Penny, why do I know that name? And he's talking about his comic Sex and Monsters, and he's got this whole little brand on the internet. He's actually a lawyer by day, and
that's awesome.
And so I just sent him an email saying, hey, you know, I sponsored your thing last year, and I heard you on this this podcast, and I just wanted to tell you how much you know, I enjoyed listening to you as much as I enjoyed the glasses last year. Anyway, we got the emailing back and forth, and he sent me a couple comics. And let's see, where are they? Oh yeah, it's great. And one of them was a record. He's got Tiki Surf Witches.
Dude, that is a dope cover.
Isn't that crazy? And then Tiki Surf Witches Want Blood, right here. But I'll show you some panels. It can get a little naughty.
It's all right, man. This isn't made for kids.
Oh, excellent. And what's cool, it's like super funny and super retro, as you can see.
Dude, his artwork, for him being a lawyer by day.
Oh, he's the writer. There's another guy, Nick.
Okay.
Nick Polwico. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. But what's cool is he's every 4 pages or so, he builds the story to a climax, and then he stops it with the appearance of the zombie, and then he gives you the recipe to make a zombie. And then he'll build the story back up to another climax and use that as a transition for another drink recipe. But it's very funny, and so that's the last comic book I read.
All right, so before we get off of comics, I want to give you a recommendation. I have never been a Hulk fan at all. He's like Superman in the sense that he is so hard to read, because what do you do with somebody that's from a different planet like Superman, or somebody that was made by a gamma bomb, when all he does is get angry and he gets stronger? However, there is a comic book, and it's about to wrap up here. It's written by Al Ewing, and I can't remember the artist, unfortunately, but it's fantastic. It's called Immortal Hulk. They took a Dr. and Jekyll approach to Hulk, and they made him into a monster. And the only reason I bring this up is because a couple issues ago, they actually had the Thing appear. So, you know, Bruce Banner's going through all of these crazy dissociative disorder, identity disorder, whatever it is, DID.
Right.
So he's got all these things going on in his head. And they were like, you know what we need? We need the Thing to come over here and punch the Hulk in the face. And that's what's going to happen. And they sit down and they have coffee at a diner, and the Hulk's all shriveled up. He looks like a zombie. And the Thing's just being the Thing. He's like, yeah, you remember when you killed me, a few, like last year before last? He's like, I came back to just punch you in the face and just beat the hell out of you. But it is a fantastic panel, because you see Ben Grimm just sitting there, and he's across the little desk, or the little table at the diner with the Hulk. It is a fantastic comic. You can get most of the trades now for like $10-15. Because
so was it a trade, or was it Immortal Hulk a title and it went on for a while?
Oh, it's been on for about almost 50. It's going to conclude with 50
Okay.
issues. So it's issue 44. A lot of the earlier issues, I mean, I picked up issue 1 for less than $100 because it was just, they were introducing characters. It was a hot title. It was hard to get at that point. But get them in trade because it's considerably cheaper. But it's a fantastic comic book.
Cool.
Now, to get off our selfless promotion for Marvel,
Right.
and back to you, when I told you I was going to hit pause and we are just going to hit record right away, you actually had the first movie that was an animation movie. And I know you said you worked on it very little, but Ratigan and Fidget, right, from The Great Mouse Detective, those two characters haunted me from such a young age. That was the first time I remember as a kid just being terrified of something that I knew was fake, that I knew somebody created, that I knew somebody colored, but I don't know what it was. I could not shake Ratigan's, his demeanor, his presence, his aura, if that's what you want to call it. It was just such a fantastic movie. And I would love to know how you got onto this. We talked briefly about it, but I think it's a really cool story for the listeners to hear as well.
Yeah, well, I was recently out of Cal Arts, and I was freelancing around town, and I was working for this unit of Disney, special projects unit, that was making Sport Goofy shorts.
Mm-hmm.
And I got on with the director really well. He's a good friend of mine now, and he asked me to come in house. So I was working there about 6 months, and Disney decided they were going to close the unit down. But they were in what do we call it exactly? This is the G or PG rated version. They were trying to finish the movie, so they were really in a deep pile. And so they asked us if we would come help finish the movie. Mm-hmm. So I think I was not good enough to get hired right off the street, but I was good enough to come in and help finish the movie. And I was lucky enough to work for Glenn Keane. I worked in his unit, so learned a lot from him. But the benefit of that is I got to work on some really great scenes during the climax, mostly just little takes. Mm-hmm. Ratigan's big take before he smashes into Big Ben, scene where Ratigan throws Fidget off his little dirigible, and you see him sort of flutter like a wounded sparrow. He splashes into the water, to the Thames, I think. And there's a handful of others I can remember doing a little take of Ratigan. I kind of remember animating it. I mean, that goes back a long time. That's like 30 years. But, you mentioned Ratigan and how he scared you. I mean, that's Vincent Price. So here I was like 20 odd years old, and I'm, with all these like giants at Disney feature animation. And really, in retrospect, they weren't much older than me. But I remember one day seeing Vincent Price walk down the hallway. I'm like, that's Vincent Price. All I could do was look at him. I was too terrified to ever go up and say hi or anything, but I was just aghast. This kid from Portland, Oregon, like, that's Vincent Price right over there.
That is, first off, do you still live in Portland?
No, I live north of LA.
Okay, that's right. We talked about that. I'm sorry.
That's all right, because I still work for the studios. So, and before COVID, we were required to actually go into the office occasionally.
I mean, I was stationed in Bremerton, Washington, for roughly a year before we deployed. That was my first duty station. My favorite state I have ever lived in was Washington State. And we came out of the dry docks with our boat. And it was, when you go into the dry docks, you go in there to get your boat fixed, right?
Wait, what branch of the service were you in?
I was a Navy guy, sadly.
Oh, no. So was my dad. That's awesome.
Oh, okay. Do you remember what his rate was or what he did?
Gosh, he just said he was a decade, whatever that is.
Okay, so he was probably, he's probably a bosun's mate. Those
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay, yeah, those were we would call them salty. It was a term of endearment. It meant like they had like they were a veteran of the Navy. Like you look at him, you're like, oh man, this guy's salty. He's deployed. He's
Oh,
seen
okay.
shit. That was the rate is what they call them, the jobs and stuff. That was the rate you never really wanted to mess with because they were always outside when it was hot as hell. They were always painting. They were always covered in salt. They were always pissed off, right? So um, that was the rate you never.
Well,
really
that explains a lot now.
But so we came out of the dry dock, and
I
usually
shouldn't say that. My dad's like Popeye. He laughs easily.
Yeah.
But, go ahead. Yeah, I thought that was an awful cheap shot. Dad.
I enjoy that, man. But yeah, so we come out of the dry docks, and you're supposed to have your boat completely fixed, but needless to say, it was not fixed. We had to go back in the dry docks, but these things are scheduled so far out that as soon as you go out, another ship is coming in because they've got these timetables on when you deploy and all this other stuff. So our boat is still broke, so they had to tug us down to Portland, Oregon. And this is the first time I'd ever been to Portland, Oregon. I don't know if they had them when you were there or when the last time you were there was, but this is the first time I got to eat at Voodoo Donuts. Fantastic donuts. And I also got to eat, and like I said, I don't know how new this place is, but it was during I think it was the Rose Festival or the Rose Garden, something along those lines.
Sure, Rose Festival.
Yes, and I got to eat at this pizza place. It's called Pizza Schmizza. You ever heard of that place?
No, I haven't been there in a while.
Man, the pizza, it's amazing. But nonetheless, I got to see Portland, Oregon. I got to see Seattle, Washington. I would love to move back to the Pacific Northwest. It's some of the prettiest things I've ever seen. And the Goonies was shot there too. So not in Portland specifically, but
yeah, Cannon Beach.
Yeah. So just a great place. I really enjoy, like I said, where you were born at, Chris.
Cool.
But nonetheless, man, so we got into Radigan and Fidget, and then we were talking about how you were just stunned with Vincent Price, just seeing him. I mean, was that I don't want to say it was probably the last time you were shell-shocked or stunned to see somebody like that, but was there anybody else that really stuck out on that cast that you were like, holy shit, that's insert name here?
I've actually never lost that. Because with Scooby Doo recently, my pitch was to do a new contemporary version of the Scooby Doo movies where they ran into some celebrity guest stars. And so I just got to work with some phenomenal people. But the first time that I actually met somebody that was just a giant, it was Robin Williams.
Oh.
And I was directing a pre-show for the Circle Vision Paris show in Disneyland.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to talk to him. We were doing a run through of the script. And he asked me a question about it. Is this a rap? Is this a song? Is this, and I remember talking and being very happy that words came out of my mouth. And everyone else, words have come out okay. I don't know how coherent they were, but man, that something about Robin Williams, and he couldn't have been nicer. He was there with Rhea Perlman, and I don't know. That was like looking at a giant for sure.
He's my all-time favorite actor was him. Robin Williams in Mrs. Doubtfire made me want to be, even though I didn't go down this path, because I really didn't know how to ask, my parents, my mom specifically, like, you're a 8-9-year-old boy in the 90s and you're like, hey mom, I would like makeup because I want to make movie magic like Robin Williams did in Mrs. Doubtfire. So I never really pursued that dream. But him alone, like, just, if you want to talk about presence, him being on screen. I mean, I don't have to tell you, you got to talk to him. I'm super jealous there, Chris. So just a fantastic guy. And I know that almost everything he did was ad lib. He didn't really follow a script. He had bullet points and then he would hit them and then he would just go few and far, or he would go above and beyond is what I meant to say.
Well, he would do the script. But then as he would do it, he would just start improving and he would just kind of keep changing it and being creative with it. Until at the end, it was pretty much his interpretation of what the original script was. And you probably heard this story because it's been reprinted a lot, but in Aladdin, where he plays the
genie,
the market guy. No, the market guy. Remember, he was the guy at the beginning telling the story.
Oh, yes.
He was like a salesman in the market.
Yeah.
He was a genie, of course, and that was brilliant. But what they did was is they had a table full of just stuff, and it was covered with a sheet. And before he recorded, they pulled the sheet off and they just revealed stuff. It was like, you know, an egg beater and, you know, some crazy cooking thing or a goofy pen. And he would just go from thing to thing and do a little riff on it. And again, I didn't work on Aladdin, unfortunately. It was one of my favorite Disney movies. But it was described as the first time they cut the movie together, they cut Robin's performance of the script, and then they cut a little out and they put in a little more of his improv. Then they cut a little more out of the original script and put in a little more improv, till eventually all that's left is Robin's improv. I have no idea if that's true, but it sounds about right.
Like I said, I can't remember what we were talking about earlier when I said we're just going to roll with it. We're going to roll with that because that, like I said, that guy is my hero when it comes to actors. Just he inspired and just sparked an imagination within me. Just seeing him on a screen, it's still sad as hell when you think about how his life ended. I mean, I wish if there was a time machine. I wish if Doc Brown could come back and just change anything. That's one thing that we could. But going back to Scooby Doo, man, because like I said, I told you a story, but I won't repeat it here because I don't want to get hit with life later. But Scooby Doo was so huge for me at so many different periods of my life, and to see that it came back as that guest starring type of show, which I got introduced. I didn't see Scooby Doo the original 2 seasons. I got to see it. I think my first one was either Scooby Doo meets the Addams Family or Scooby Doo meets the Harlem Globetrotters.
Sure, that's the one everybody remembers for some reason.
You know, it's those two. It's like the Addams Family, I think, is, like I said, it's 1A, 1B type of thing, is those two shows that I remember the most. But how did this one come about? I mean, were you just an artist that came on board? Were you trying to pitch this show, or how'd you get on board?
Well, I'd pitched a few things at Warner Brothers before, but I'd never worked there. And I was working on a project that got stalled, as many things do in Hollywood. And I emailed one of the executives and said, hey, I'm on this project. It looks like it's stalled. I don't know if it's for 2 weeks or forever, but, you know, I'm available. We always talked about doing, you know, some kind of cartoony superhero-y thing. Maybe now's the time. So then I got referred to another development executive from the senior exec, and he had this project that actually fit that bill to a T. And I developed it, brought in a writer, we got it to script, did a bunch of artwork, and then it didn't go anywhere. Again, that's sort of the nature of Hollywood. But he said, the executive said, well, what do you think about Scooby Doo? I said, I said, I don't know. I said, I watched it when I was a kid, you know, when the first 2 years it was on, first 2 or 3 years. But then, you know, when I got interested in sort of, you know, real science fiction and horror, I kind of left it behind. And I haven't really thought about it. And I said, but I'm not saying no. Let me just think about it. And he said, okay, well, the only thing is we want original costumes. He said, and I said, okay, great. So I went back and I thought, just like you, well, the things that stick out were the Scooby-Doo movies, when they met the Harlem Globetrotters. The weirdest one is when they met Laurel and Hardy, when Laurel and Hardy were actually dead at that point. And then a bunch of celebrities as a kid that I didn't even know. And then Sonny and Cher and
Batman and Robin.
So yeah, Batman and Robin, you know, so I'm thinking, my God, I could pitch, maybe I could actually draw Batman. I could have Batman meet and get the cool Batman to meet them instead of like the dorky Scooby-Doo Batman from the 60s. But so I came back with a pitch, and I pretty much pitched that. I said, look, let's do a version of the original Scooby-Doo movies. Let's do a mix of cartoon guest stars and celebrity guest stars. And the one thing I'd like to do, though, because you want to go retro, let's go totally retro and not apologize for it. I said, when Shaggy and Scooby do a take, let's just do the same take every time. When they run down the hallway, let's make the hallway as long as it needs to be to fill the scene. And we'll have the same plant going by in the foreground and the same painting in the background, and just embrace that stuff. And they said, great. And then they hooked me up with the story editor, Mike Ryan. We became really good partners, and he loved Scooby-Doo more than any adult man should, as he puts it. And so we just started making this thing. And but that was we were talking about celebrity close encounters and all that. You know, this was just a real fun for me because, you know, we would just sit around a room and say, well, who should we go out to? And then when we had a list, then we go to our executive, and when he had a list, and he'd go to his executive, and then they would just, agents would start going out to different celebrities, and then as soon as they'd say yes, our writer would Mike would just start writing the scripts as fast as he could, or working with his writing team.
Now, was there any guest that you really, really wanted that you didn't get?
Yeah, but I can't say that. Yeah, there were a few for sure.
Yeah.
One of the most fun though, and I'm only mentioning it, excuse me, and my phone's spam. All right, so spam calls many times a day. I'm sick of hearing about her. What was I going to say? So was it Batman? Was it stupid phone call derailed me?
Oh, we were talking about guests that you wanted but you couldn't get, and then you said.
Oh, that's right. Well, recently, this is going to sound crazy, but Rolling Stone magazine called me up because we had Axl Rose as a guest star.
Yeah.
And I guess, and he was wonderful. It was really great to meet him, and Welcome to the Jungle and all that. I'm a big Axl Rose fan, and it was actually suggested by one of my directors, Mike Milo, that we go out to him, and he said yes. But I guess in the music world, because he hasn't recorded a song in 7 years, and he doesn't do interviews, he's like the Howard Hughes. So the fact that I had this close encounter Axl Rose sighting was a really big deal to them, and I ended up doing a really nice interview. But he was super fun, in terms of actors, like Whoopi Goldberg was great, because we have that Star Trek connection, and I actually animated a couple scenes of her as the Jackal in Lion King. And so when I got her on the phone, because she was in New York because of her TV show, I said, we've worked together and you don't know it. And she's like, oh. And I told her about Lion King, and that kind of broke the ice, and we talked about cartoons, and then Star Trek, and I'm a big Star Trek nerd, and so is she. And so I guess what impressed me most about her, and look, everyone was great that I worked with and super nice, but I just could tell that she's one of those people that wants to know who it is on the other end of the phone. And she gave me great advice for directing, how she likes to work as an actor. She liked to, because I always ask, the actors, how would you like to work? And would you like me to do the voice? Would you like me to read with you or not read with you, or do the voices or not read with you, or do the voices or not do the voices? And she said, what I'd like to do, I'd like to just go through it a couple of times. Let me just, do my thing. And then if you have any notes, we can jump back into it. And it was great for me. And I realized she just needed to find the material. She would just kind of go through it and sort of figure out how it sort of felt comfortable for her. And then there are a few things we went back and, where I said, oh, the room is a little bigger than that. You're shouting over about, 50-foot distance. So we need a little louder, something like that. But that was probably, one of the best experiences.
I can only imagine, because for the longest time, I knew her from Sister Act. That was one of my mom's favorite movies. I remember seeing that one so many times as a little kid and just remembering, man, that's Whoopi Goldberg. And then you start hearing as you get older. Yeah, as you get older, you start like, I can sit here, and if my brain worked for math and science and all this other stuff, I'd be a millionaire, Chris. But it works for movie quotes, and it works for cartoons, right? And it works for voices. I can sit there and be like, oh shit, that's Rob Paulson, or oh, that's Whoopi Goldberg, or insert name here. It's kind of crazy how your brain really works, and what you latch onto and what you like. And
sure.
But one thing that I really liked hearing that is that when you were doing the directing approach, you would sit down with these actors and actresses and like you'd work it through just to see what fit best for you and what best fit for the actor, so you could get the best product from the people that you were working with. Was that something that you had thought about, extensively, or is that something that you might have picked up from somebody, or is that just something you were like, oh man, we're just going to see how this person likes to do it?
Well, I guess you kind of learn over time and learn by working with other people. Because I went to school to be a cartoonist, not to be a director and not to be an actor. So I started directing, and I'd always prepare, but sometimes I could tell it went better than others. And I was thinking, I don't get it. I'm doing the same thing. What am I not doing right? And I had the opportunity to go to dinner with Jonathan Smith, Dr. Smith from Lost in Space, and he was in Bug's Life. And turns out we had common friends, and I was like, and I was asked, would you like to come to dinner with us? I'm like, are you kidding me? Yeah. So here I am at dinner with Jonathan. He was wonderful. He was just what you'd imagine he would be. And I felt like he was kind of safe to ask him this question because he was a little bit outside my circle. And I told him, I said, I went to school. I didn't go to school to be a director. And I said, so I don't really know what I'm doing. And luckily everyone's patient with me. But I said, what do you need? What do you want from a director? And he said, really, he says, all I need to know is what my character wants and how they feel about those around them.
Yeah.
So imagine two people are dancing and they're talking about dinner or the kids, and you tell someone you want to stab them.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to influence everything that actor says and the little mannerisms they do. But if you say you want to kiss them, then it's going to be completely different. So falling back onto that, what does your character want? If I feel like I've gone off track, I'll just say, well, here's what you want. And then the actors, they all know what to do with that.
I got to imagine it's a very refreshing approach because you in any line of work, excuse me, in any line of work, you've got that person that just likes to micromanage, and that person just like, look, man, here's this is an end result. This is what I want. How you get to that conclusion is completely up to you. If you got a better way of doing it, quicker way, easier way, if it works for you and it doesn't work for me, but we still get the same result, go for it. And I always think that people work harder or enjoy working more when you have that character, or when you have that person you're working for. It's like, just do what you need to do. I'm going to give you as little input as possible. If we go too far in one direction, I'll have to ring it back in because obviously that's my job. But like I said, I always feel like you get a better product at the end of the day when you let the people that you hired do the job that they're supposed to do. I mean, at least that's.
No, I think that's right. Because if you, and not that I haven't like accidentally strayed into that territory too, or that lane, but whenever I felt like if an actor's been getting frustrated and I'm not getting what I'm hearing in my head or what I was expecting, if I back up and say, look, I don't know, let me pitch the scene to you and you tell me, let's, I'm going to say this badly too, but I think that's what I'm saying is that when I back up from the scene and engage the actor as like a partner, here's what I'm trying to say. Maybe it's the line, maybe I'm steering you wrong with my direction, but this is what the scene's about. Not even what your character's about. Here's what the scene's about. Do you know, 9 times out of 10, they have an idea on it.
Yeah. I mean, it
they
goes
know how to
down
make this stuff work. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it just goes down to conversing and not confronting people, talk with people that way, because y'all want the same. Nobody wants to make something bad. I don't care what anybody says. At the end of the day, nobody wants to put their name on something that everybody's like, man, that sucked. Everybody wants, at least in my opinion, or the people that I try to surround myself with, we all want the same thing. We all want to be good at what we do. We all want to have some kind of, whether it's a clap or a salute or whatever it is, we all, at the end of the day, want the same adulations that everybody else wants. We all want to be appreciated for what we do, and we want to do something good. We don't want to do something bad. So when you sit there and you talk with them by saying, no, this is what I want, and when you open those lines of communication, I feel like people become a little bit like it's easier to talk to you, or it's like, oh man, he's not just telling me what he wants. He's asking me, or we're working through this as a team, as it should be. And I think that's a fantastic way to really lead people. So, but yeah,
I agree.
Yeah. So, shit, man, we went off on a little tangent there, and I was sitting there talking way more than I should have at that point.
I do that all the time.
Well, my wife will sit there and tell me, she's like, man, you talk a lot. And I was like, yeah, I guess I really do. And I used to say like because my kid would come home and then it was just a mile a minute. Whenever he would come home and we'd see each other, he'd have to tell you his entire day in 35 seconds. And I would look at him and like, man, you said more in 35 seconds than I've said all day. And the roles have kind of reversed, trying to get stuff out of 11-year-old now. It's like, hey man, I remember when you used to sit on my lap and we'd talk and talk and talk and talk. Now it just feels like I'm the one talking. So.
Okay, but now there are going to be times when he starts talking that you can't let him stop. because if you say hang on for a minute and then come finish what you're doing and come back 10 minutes later, it's going to be gone.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting time because we are roughly 2.5 months away from our second child. And like I said, I have an 11-year-old.
Oh my God, congratulations.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to it because I missed a lot with him with deployments and stuff like that. So I missed first words, first steps, that type of stuff. So it's going to be interesting because, like I said, 11 years is just 3 people. I mean, I've got 4 dogs and a cat, so that's different than having another person. But when you're a family unit of 3 and then you've got somebody else coming into the fold, you're like, man, I wonder how this is going to get. Is this like a muscle memory type of thing? Will I just like jump, oh, this is how you change a diaper? Or is this going to be like doing it all over again? Am I going to, I don't know if that makes sense.
No, you'll definitely be better from the experience, but your kids are going to be different. And what's funny is that my kids are both grown now, and they're both coincidentally in animation.
Oh, that's awesome.
My son is a storyboard artist, and my daughter's in management at Nickelodeon. But you know what's funny that because I moved with Brittany, I remember I changed her more, and I remember my ex-wife fed her more. And then Kevin, I just remember feeding him all the time. I changed him less. I remember Brittany growing up when she was little. I'd always have to, give her the little nudge. No, you got to do this now. No, get up off the couch. And Kevin, I'd have to be, hey, buddy, it's okay if you strike out every time, or put that book away. He was a higher achiever. So I felt I was always doing a push me, pull you thing with the kids in different ways. But in terms of like the muscle memory of all that stuff, the dad gene kicks in.
Yeah, I mean, I like I said, I'm really looking forward to it because it's like I said, it's weird, but it's like, it's not like we didn't plan for it, because when you don't use protection, it's like it's a roll of the dice every time. So you're just like, oh man, we're gonna have a kid, and it's just weird that it happened 11 years after we had our first one.
Sure.
So like I said, nonetheless, I'm getting, and all of this, the only reason I bring this up is because I get to introduce and hopefully scare the shit out of my new son that's coming in a couple months with Radigan and Fidget, like I was scared the shit out of back in the day. So it's a circle, man. We're going to be talking, hopefully 20 years down the road, my son will be talking to your son and interviewing him just like I'm interviewing you now. It's like the circle of life, to bring it back to one thing. But as we not start to wind down, because I have kept you on here for about 45 minutes now at this point, there are a few titles that I really, really wanted to talk about. And sure. Hocus Pocus was one of them. This is a movie we watch every single Halloween. And looking into, when I go and do the research, obviously, I'll hit Wikipedia. If you guys have a website, I hit your website. IMDb is a facet of knowledge. However, I've noticed that a lot of stuff on IMDb is just like Wikipedia. Anybody can update it and anybody can change it. And as I told you before, I made that mistake with one person. I won't name him. Nice guy up until I just said the wrong title. And then it kind of went downhill after that. But nonetheless, I would love to know more about your involvement with Hocus Pocus.
Well, before I got that first job at Disney, I mentioned I was freelancing around. Mm-hmm. And one of those jobs was I learned to do computer graphics. Mm-hmm. So I did like an early Spider-Man for the Marvel Productions logo, and Golden Grams commercial, and the Mick Jagger video. So when I went to Disney, so I knew that. I was at Disney on Great Mouse Detective. I left Disney to go back to computer graphics, then came back for Oliver and Company. Mm-hmm. So I was there, and Hocus Pocus was in production, and they were having trouble with their animated cat. So the producers came over to feature animation and said, here, what do? We need to fix our cat. And because Peter Schneider, the head of the department, knew I had CG experience, he said, talk to Chris Bailey. Mm-hmm. So I talked to them, and they showed me the work, and it was promising, but they clearly didn't have the supervision they needed to pull it off, or the stuff was so raw. They didn't know what was a great approach and maybe wasn't done particularly well, and what was done well, but maybe not the best approach. And I gave them my 2 cents, and they said, okay, supervise a test. Mm-hmm. So I supervised a test in all these different approaches, and we picked one with rhythm and hues, where we would shoot the real cat and digitally remove its head, put a new CG head on it, and then put a CG sock and blend it in with the black cat. And that was literally it. I was at Feature Animation. I got a call, here, come to look at this live action movie, look at the visual effects, ask us, tell us what you think we should do. And they liked me and hired me. And I'm supervising the visual effects on the movie. And I shot a couple scenes second unit and was on set every day. And it was this really great experience.
It is like when you were one of the most humble people I've ever met in my life right off the bat. If I was sitting behind Chuck Jones and I got invited to his house, I would tell everybody, I walk into 7-Eleven, guess what? I sat down with Chuck Jones. You don't know who Chuck Jones is, but you know exactly who Chuck Jones is. And then I went out to dinner, and then I did this, and then I did that. And then I got to mess with Zachary Binks. I was the reason that he worked so well. I mean, it's, like I said, there are so many paths that all led me to talking to you today. I mean, between all these characters and all these shows you worked on. I mean, do you ever just sit back and you're like, God damn, I've done a lot of stuff that a lot of people like. And are you just ever like,
it comes, well, I don't really think about it in those terms, but occasionally it comes up.
Mhm.
Like, I'll get an email from somebody that, I looked at their work years ago and now they're a professional, and they'll say something nice to me, or something from somebody in high school. But what's funny, I recently was talking with this one guy at a studio, and turns out he was best friends with another friend of mine that lives in Philly. And he's had a career as varied as mine, or almost as varied. He started out as a 2D guy, but he's done all this 3D stuff, worked on Robot Chicken and all that. And I said, man, you've done a lot of stuff. How did that come about? Because people ask me that question. I figured it was fair to turn it on somebody else. And he said, just follow the work. I'm like, oh my God, I think that's what I've done. Because in the beginning, when I started in animation, it wasn't like today. Disney made a movie every 4 years, and occasionally there would be something interesting, like Dragon's Lair and Space Ace, the video games, and commercials, occasional special. So I was just trying to do anything I could to stay employed. So I learned CGI when I got the opportunity. Then it was, hey, want to work on this live action film doing visual effects? Sure. And it turned out to be this great experience. So I think just being open to new things, and realizing that it is actually possible for an artist to starve, that I followed the work, and that led me to, theme park films. And I actually worked on Space Ace and Dragon's Lair 2 for Don Bluth, and the Despicable Me ride.
I've been on that ride. That ride is fun. The Minions ride. It is a fun ride.
Yeah, thanks for that. That was great. Real Effects did the animation for that, so I worked with them pretty closely. And those characters are so great. And again, I love theme parks. I love motion rides. I really love all this stuff: 3D, visual effects, monsters, comics. So, and I think that's sort of my I don't know if there's an opposite of kryptonite, but if whatever the opposite of kryptonite is, what makes you stronger? I don't know. Spinach, Popeye and spinach. My spinach would be really that I can pretty much get interested and excited about whatever I'm working on. I can find something in there to wrap my head around. But not that it's hard with the Despicable Me characters, of course. But 3D, it doesn't matter to me if it's a film or a short or a TV show. On one hand, I think I'm sort of hard to peg in my career, because what does Chris do exactly? But really, it's about, and my agent knows, I just like to do things that are interesting to me.
I mean, it goes just to show, like, whenever you see somebody that is having fun, you can tell by what they put out, right? You never want to go to, if you got to get a shot, right? If you got to get a shot, or you got to have, your teeth worked on by the dentist, you don't want to go to the guy that's consistently frowning or just is trying to do anything but his job. You want to go to the dude that's smiling, that's having a good time, that can find the good in the shittiest of situations, right? And there was something you hit on when you talked about where you were talking, you were just chasing the job, or you're just, trying to get work, you're trying to do this. I never thought about it that way, because when I think about it, I think of like, oh man, you guys got to work with, Robin Williams, you got to work with, Chuck, you got to do all of this crazy stuff. So as an outsider looking in, right? I'm thinking it's just a fascinating world, right? And then I take a step back when you said what you said, right? So I cook for a living. It is a weird job most days. It's a fun job some days, but it's always different and it's always rewarding when you get that one person that comes up and says, you know what, that was the best meal I've ever had in my life, or we were expecting one thing and you guys just blew it off the map for us. And it goes up to something that I heard my kids talk about. I'm pretty sure you've heard it too with your kids when their friends have come over. You know, your kids might say, or your kids' friends might say, "Oh man, your dad worked on this." My kids' friends will come over and say, "Your dad is a great cook," and it's just like, well, yeah, that's what he does. He draws or he cooks. He does something really well, and they're just not used to it. So I never thought about it that way until you said what you said, and I think it's a brilliant way to really look at what you do and what people do, and you're just like, man, it's just day-to-day living for me type of thing. I'm glad, people enjoy it. I have a lot of fun doing it because I can always find something positive or something good about what I do. And I don't think that's highlighted enough in anybody's career, so it's really nice to hear something like that is what I'm getting at, Chris.
Yeah, cool.
So as we start to wind down here, even though I said that again for the second time,
That's all right.
So I want to know, man, out of all of the projects you've really, really worked on, from doing just the animation to now you're directing, right? One, did you think that you would take this route as far as from storyboarding and artist and all of the CGI stuff that you've done, and now you're taking a different look or a different view at how the sausage is made, to an extent? I mean, did you think you'd end up as a director?
No, gosh. I was, even when I was at Cal Arts and the world had kind of cracked open, I was thinking, well, I just want to be that guy that people think about when they have a project starting up, that they'll hire. So so I've exceeded, those expectations, which is great. I feel like anything after that is just gravy. But gosh, I think like following the work, having a good 10 years as an animator and a director at Disney Feature Animation, was brilliant. And then taking that experience into TV on Kim Possible and giving
Great
it
show.
that. Yeah, thank you for that. And Mark and Bob were the two creators of that show, and they brought me on as a co-producer, supervising director, and they just let me put my own stamp on it. And
Yeah.
and just bringing that feature animation, experience to limited animation, like to I'm getting into the weeds a little bit, but there, animations based on change of shape and sort of reversing the curve and the line of action. And so if you can bake that into your poses in the storyboard, like no matter if of an A, B, or C level animator gets that shot at the subcontracting studio, it's going to be strong and look like something.
Yeah.
So, that's so that was very gratifying because and that show connected with a lot of people. But I don't know. There's been so many because my first big supervising job in CGI was on Mighty Joe Young, and the movie didn't do great in terms of box office, but I think in terms of like working with the crew and the difficulties everybody was having with that film, and ultimately the final result is amazing, and everybody's relationships came out really strong at the other end. That was a super positive one.
It was a touching movie too. I'm a huge King Kong fan, even though Joe and Kong are completely different.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that.
There is something about I cannot wait for Godzilla versus King. I cannot wait.
Yeah, me too. I was just reading something about some early reviews and things.
Oh, I am so excited. Like, I want to see this monkey beat the shit out of this lizard. Yeah. There's just 1 for mammals and 0 for reptilians, right? So yeah, I'm so excited.
I have a great anecdote for you from Mighty Joe Young. I don't know how close you remember the movie, but there's a scene where he's in the amusement park at the end, and he comes out of the funhouse, and you can see all of his reflections all around him. It was a pretty brilliant CGI shot. Anyway, Joe comes walking out, his knuckles, and everyone's screaming and running, and pauses, looks left and looks right. Then he throws his head down for a little look, and then he starts walking forward again. And we were in dailies, and the editor's like, "What the hell's he looking down for?" And I said, "I don't know. I guess he's just figuring out, wants to make sure he's not stepping into a hole or something. He's got solid ground ahead of him." And And I don't know if that satisfied him or not. I said, look, we've been, 90% of the movie was a man, wearing a suit, an actor wearing a suit. And he was brilliant. And so our job really as animators was to look at that footage, identify how he moved, what he did to mimic a gorilla. Because, humans have very little upper body strength and more lower body strength. Gorillas, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
So he's really mimicking gorilla poses, but using his legs. So we had to sort of key into that. And there's things he did with his hands and his feet. So anyway, I said, look, we've been looking at John's behaviors from the rest of the film. And Joe oftentimes just puts his head down. When he stops walking, he'll put his head down and he'll look around. Then he puts his head down again and he starts walking off. And he goes, that's John looking for his mark through the mask. I'm trying to cut all those out of the film.
That is fantastic. I'm so glad you told me that story, because I've seen that movie maybe 3 or 4 times in my life, and it's something I'm gonna have to go back and watch it with my son. It's shit. I'm 32 this year, I think. Yeah, I'm 32 this year. I think the last time I saw it, man, maybe in my early 20s, 2021. I might have saw it when my wife and I, first got out to Washington, when we started going to FYE, and we just get any movie we could, because it was before my son was born. So, we were trying to save all the money we could back then. So we did everything in-house. We were watching TV, cartoons, all that type of stuff. I was watching cartoons because she can't stand cartoons. That's
no, it ain't so.
I've tried so many times to get her into it, and she always looks at me like side eye looks, and she's like,
wait, like features or short cartoons or any cartoon?
Any cartoons. I've tried so many times. I just look at her, I'm like, who hurt you as a child? Like, you don't feel like a little child, or you don't feel happy when you see. She's like, no. And then you watch the stuff she watches, and it's some of the most depressing stuff. Like, she'll watch these it's not depressing, it's like doctor shows and stuff like that, which I can't do because I have a very sensitive stomach. So I see, even though I know it's fake, I see somebody's brain pulsating because it's somebody getting operated on. I just want to vomit. It's like, no, it's just not for me. So, everybody's got their quirks, everybody's got what they're into. But Mighty Joe Young is something we're gonna have to revisit, because like I said, that is a fantastic movie that does not get, I think if people looked at that movie now, you'd probably have a bigger reception for it than you did back then, which makes no sense really, because if you look at the movies that were coming out back then, very hit or miss. You don't have, like, Boys and Girls, you don't have the level and the caliber of movies that we have now. 15 years ago, 10 years ago, the Marvel machine just really turned a switch up when they made Iron Man, and then they started making so everything is kind of flipped on its head. I mean, even TV back in the day, nobody gave a shit about TV. It was all feature films. You had very few shows.
TV's amazing now.
It's like every show you turn on is like soprano level quality. You're just like, how the hell, like Breaking Bad, there's no way in hell that a Breaking Bad gets made 20 years ago. There's just
even the visual effects. You look at Game of Thrones, you're like, that's a movie every week.
Yes. I mean, and then you look at their budget, and then you're like, oh yeah, this is
of course.
So
but thank you for that on Mighty Joe. It was one other thing, I mentioned the little, it's not a blooper really, but the things we sort of have to, kind of put into work. I'm sorry, I'm fumbling over this, trying to find a transition into this next behind the scenes bit that I just gave you. In X-Men 2, when we saw the first rough cut of Nightcrawler trying to kill the president, and it was just like a guy on wires and half the walls aren't there, it was great. Yeah. We just knew it was going to be great. But there's a scene in the Oval Office where Nightcrawler's just appearing and disappearing, and he's just kicking the hell out of all these guys, right? Mm-hmm. Well, there was a scene where Nightcrawler kicks somebody, but then somebody behind that guy all of a sudden reacted like he got punched. Mm-hmm. And you couldn't notice it, in just the cacophony of noise and violence. But I'm like, well, he's not moving for any reason. And Brian was very concerned that the characters be taken seriously and we not do anything slapsticky or goofy with them. But we decided to have Nightcrawler's tail come
Yeah.
by and slap that guy in the face, sending him going. And man, it totally sells it.
That character alone, when we talk about X-Men, my favorite X-Men of all time is Colossus. I don't know what it is about him, but anytime I saw him on a cartoon or anytime I saw him on a comic book panel, there was just something that drew me to Colossus. And very second close character was Nightcrawler, one of the most, if not the most underrated character in the entire X-Men universe. When I saw him coming up, like I remember going to see this movie in the theaters, and then every time he was on, I'm like, oh my God, it's Night. I cannot.
Yeah, I know, right?
I cannot believe he is on the big screen right now. I was treating it like I had stake in the game, Chris. I was just like, oh my God, he's here. He's here. Like, how are you guys not up out of your chair? The only thing that I really, 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 really wanted to see, but when you were talking about Brian, I want to make sure it was very, very real. I wanted to see the BAMF. I wanted to see the BAMF.
Yeah.
I wanted to see that so bad. And I was hoping beyond hope that it might be in a bloopers reel or something like that. When you see the director's cut, back then I was just super deep into the director's cut editions on all the stuff. And that was one thing that I was like, oh man, they didn't even acknowledge it. I was like, I feel like it would have been such a tip to the cap to the true fans if we could have got that.
Well, well, he did do the BAMF effect. So what were you looking for specifically? You just want to have it mentioned, or?
I just wanted to see it pop up like in the comic books, just like you just see it. Because whenever I see Nightcrawler, that's the second thing. It's like when you think about Adam West's Batman, you think of Bang Pow, all that stuff,
sure.
Right. So I just wanted to see it like if it was a comic book panel.
Like the Roadrunner zip.
Yeah.
Goes, bam.
It would make no sense whatsoever in the movie, but I was like, that's just one thing that I was like, oh man, it would just be like, for me, it would have been like I said, the cherry on the top of the sundae, even though
sure.
I cherries.
Okay, I have one. I had a tiny contribution to the BAMF effect in the movie.
Yeah.
Is that when Brian would pitch the BAMF effect, and I wasn't in these meetings, but the guys clearly weren't giving him what he was looking for, but they said he would describe this very complicated thing that like Nightcrawler appears, and so it sort of pushes all the dirt and the dust that's in the air out, and then he's got his own little smoky thing going on. And essentially he was describing this very simple 8-frame effect in like 2 or 3 paragraphs. Yeah. So what they were giving him back was like ridiculously complicated because they were trying to interpret what he was saying. Mm-hmm. And so I was asked to take a look at it, and so the only advice I gave them was, do this in 3 frames, do this in 8, and then let all this smoky stuff linger for another 2 or 3 seconds, and you'll totally be good. So I was just bringing, again, that feature animation timing to what they'd already worked out, and then it got approved, and I never went to another meeting on the BAMF effect again. Well, but and that's for me, reading those comics over all those years, it goes, boof, bam, like that. I just knew what the timing should be in my head, and I saw this brilliant work that they showed me, and I was like, oh, I get it while it's not resonating with Brian, because it's not resonating with me for the same reason.
It's always fun, like whenever that's one thing I think DC is missing in their movies, and you kind of see. Have you seen Snyder's cut for Justice League yet?
I did, yeah, I watched it the other day.
Phenomenal movie. The only, and this is me just bitching to bitch. I never review and rate anything because I can't do what you guys do for a living. It's just not fair. That'd be like you coming into my kitchen and be like, oh man, you don't know how to use salt, right? And I think it's a shitty way to really look at something that's supposed to be entertaining. And I am the easiest person to please, really, when it comes to movies or cartoons. Make me laugh, make me feel something for these characters. I'm never going to go out and outwardly shit on something because I just don't think there's a place for it. I think it's pointless.
Well, you go into it wanting to believe it. You want to 100% have a good time.
It's like the movie theaters, and that's what sucks so much about COVID, other than, this first world problems at this point. But, going to see movies in an actual movie theater with my son was one of my favorite things I got to do. As the years have gotten on and he's gotten older and he's actually, able to sit through an entire movie. It's one of those things like I absolutely loved, going to do. And just, if you can suspend disbelief for 2 hours, if you can get my attention for 2 hours, whether it be a cartoon, a movie, insert whatever here, I'm going to love the movie regardless. If it failed halfway through it or it failed the ending, it just didn't stick the landing. you still got my money and you still got my approval. I might never watch it again, but I was still entertained for some portion of that movie. And it was just one of those things. Like I said, I absolutely loved just the whole process. If you can do that, man, you're a fan. I'm a fan of yours for life. And you know, to segue towards the end, man, that's what you've done your whole career, man. It's from hit after hit for me, right? I've been entertained. I've been, you know, entranced. I've been scared. I've laughed. I've hated a character that you've worked on because he was just a rotten person, right? Or a rotten rat, or just a dingbat. You know, it was just all of these crazy things that you've done as an animator, now as a director. You know, pretty much what I'm getting at, Chris, is thank you for your contribution to.
Well, you're welcome.
I really appreciate it, man. And I hope you've had as much fun talking to me as I've had to you. And the last thing we really got to touch on is you are teaching a storyboard class, man. You want to talk about that a little bit so the fans can know where to go? Because I'm pretty sure we're going to try to sign up as many people as possible for your class.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, you know, I've always thought like directing is half teaching, because you get people at different levels, some coming right out of school. And I've had people mention to me that they thought I'd make a good teacher. So just recently I've been asked by a couple former friends and colleagues, current friends, former colleagues, Disney Feature Animation, Dave Proxima and Dave Kuhn, to be a part of their CAD animation school. And I'm going to teach TV animation for TV storyboarding.
Okay.
So again, kind of what I touched on for Kim Possible, kind of I want to bring those feature animation skills and apply them in a very, apply them toward more limited animation, because the world has too much stiff animation in it.
Yes.
You know, because some of the great stuff that so that's with CAD animation. It's online. It's a summer course, and I know that we're looking at portfolios now, and it's going to be limited to the number of students. So if anybody's interested, check it out. It's cat-animation.com.
And you guys will not be disappointed. All you got to do is just Google Chris Bailey, and then you can find out so much more about his information and a whole bunch of reasons on why you should sign up for this course. Man, Chris, like I said, it has been fun for me talking. Hopefully, like I said, hopefully you had a good time.
No, I love it, Julian. You're great. I love looking at your set behind your room too. That's awesome. Or your set behind yourself. Your room behind yourself. See, man, I hope you cleaned up some of the stuff. I'm just tripping all over myself.
Absolutely not, Chris. This is all.
People are going to see the way my brain jumps from track to track.
And if you've seen any of my episodes, they're going to be like, holy shit, this guy is like the same as the host. He's here, but he comes back to the point and then he goes back over here. And it's just, like I said, it makes for a fun conversation because you really get to see. I don't like doing yes and no interviews because I don't think it's fun.
Right.
You guys get asked the same questions on a consistent basis. And it's like going to that dentist that just does not like his job, right? He's like, fuck, I got to do this again. Here we go. He's going to ask me about basil. He's going to ask me about this.
Well, one thing real quick, though, is that the way my mind jumps around, I may stop having a conversation with somebody, but my brain will keep working on it. So 2 weeks later, like with my wife, I'll just say the next sentence in that conversation. And she'll be like, what? Where did that come from? I was like, oh, well, we were talking about this thing. That was weeks ago. I've done it my whole life. I do it with everybody in my life.
Well, I got it. I'll end it with this story real quick and make it a quick one.
Okay, very good.
So this, I'm so glad you brought this up because I just found out I do the same exact thing and I don't realize it, right? So I'm at work the other day and my sous chef Josie and my chef Chris, they were talking about something and we were talking about a dish. And then 20 minutes goes by and it's still in here in my head because I have to physically see something in order for me to get it. Like I got to ask why we do it. And I always have to preface it with like, if I ask you why, it's not because I'm questioning your authority. It's because I need to physically know why we do. So why do we reduce this by half instead of a quarter? If I know the why, I retain it. And that way, when somebody goes and asks me down the road, because you're always supposed to train your replacement. That's why you're going to be a fantastic teacher with a storyboard class, man. You've always got to train your replacement. And so it goes back and we were talking about something and then it was still going on in my head. They had already went and lived their life for 20, 30 minutes. They had multiple conversations with a whole bunch of different people at this point, and they were just going on about their life. And then I come up like I was just talking to them and like, hey man, what if we did this? And they're like, what are you talking about? I was like, oh, that thing we were just discussing. And they're like, yeah, that was like an hour and a half, 2 hours ago. And I'm like, really? It felt like 20 minutes. Are you sure it was that long? Like, yeah. And he's like, and they start laughing, like, you have this habit of like starting a conversation in mid-sentence, like we were just physically talking, but we left that conversation a long time ago. So I'm so glad there's more people like me out there, Chris. Like I said, man, it's been fun. Like I said, thank you for everything you did, man. I really appreciate it. And this goes out to all the fans, man. Meet your heroes because they're fantastic. He's been Chris. I've been Julian. This has been the What's in My Head podcast. Thank you so much, and I'll see you guys later.